validate your idea. Don't write, especially because I'm a developer, don't write a single line of code until you validated your idea. I'd say 80% of startups can actually build no code prototypes to test out what they're building before they actually go and dive into code. So really don't write any code. And when it comes to validating your idea, go and conduct multiple user interviews, try and sell your product before you have a product to sell. And that's true validation right there.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7 and 8 figure businesses, as well as a founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast. Aashni Shah is as close as I'm going to get to pronouncing it right. She was born in and grew up in Kenya, went through high school there, and then went off to Canada to get a degree in college in computer science. Loved also giving back to the community, and so while she was there, started a group of hackathons. And then after that, graduated and worked at Microsoft, and then at Square for a period of time. And then before COVID, left Square and went back to Canada and Toronto. Made the decision she wanted to do her own thing. So built a initial privacy document program that's still a side hustle, as well as the current business which she's doing, which is a full-time hustle as well. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast.
Thank you so much. And it's lovely to be here. Hello, everybody else.
Awesome. Well, it's great to have you here. And so with that, yeah, I gave a quick introduction to, or a quick run through 30-second version of a much longer journey. So why don't we take a step back and tell us a little bit about how your journey got started growing up in Kenya and going to high school there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born and grew up there. I'm probably 4th generation Kenyan at this point on both sides. So if you're able to see me, I'm Indian and my background or my heritage is Indian, and I'm very proud of that as well. But my ancestors moved from India to Kenya 4 generations ago. We've been in Kenya ever since, and I've been really fortunate to watch my dad run multiple businesses with his brothers, and it's a family business for us there. And literally grew up in the same house with my extended family, so my cousins, and it always made holiday time so much fun. When university rolled around, it was a lot of questions of, which university am I going to? And traditionally in our house, or like in the extended family, most folks would go to the UK because that was just the easy, convenient thing. But apparently I don't like doing easy, convenient things. So I ended up coming out here to Canada instead. And
what was it about Canada? Was it the school or the degree, or good? You wanted to explore a different part of the world, or what kind of made you settle on coming out to Canada?
Yeah, I think there was just something about so when I was looking into what to do for university, at the time I was split between computer science and going into tech versus going into law. And from a very young age, I've been talking about going to law school. It's only when I hit like 9th grade, I think, that I started doing more on the like tech side. And I realized that if I went to the UK, I would be forced to do one or the other. And essentially, there's no pre-law course. You go straight into law school in the UK, whereas in the US and America, the US and Canada, you have to do an undergrad before you go to law school. And I figured I could at least do some tech related things in my undergrad, and then I'd either enjoy tech and stay in it, which is what happened, or I have a technical background as I go into law school, which would give me a massive leg up when I joined the workforce, because guess what? We need lawyers who understand tech.
No, yeah. Makes good sense. Sounds like it was a good decision, and you went that direction. So you went off to Canada and started studying and went into computer science and programming and tech. And so kind of and I think you also at that point started to do hackathons and kind of get more into that aspect of things. Is that about right?
Yeah. So I've always been very active in my schooling. In high school, if there was a club, I was in it, and I was usually, part of like the leadership team in it. So I was that student, and you can say it, it's fine. Um, Coming to university, I definitely missed that component. I missed, the organization aspect of it. I missed the community aspect of it. And so I joined a group of like multiple groups at U of T as well. So, at one point I was the computer science student union president, which was so much fun. And then simultaneously, like the same year, I also started U of T Hacks, which is our first ever Canadian student hackathon. And that's where we had, for folks who aren't familiar with the term hackathon, no, we're not like illegally hacking into anything, I promise. It's more of, you bring together 500 students from a Friday to a Sunday. So it's a 72-hour event. And we would come up with ideas and then code them over the weekend and then have a competition at the end where there were some incredible prizes up for grabs. And so we hosted, like I planned and started the first ever one of those in Canada, which is incredible. They're actually hosting their 10th anniversary one in January, which I'm super excited about. And then, aside from that, I was in the video game club, which I had no business being in. I don't play video games. And then, of course, like supporting women, so women in computer science and a few other things around campus as well.
Well, sounds like certainly plenty to keep you busy throughout your school experience, both getting the degrees and organizing several different clubs and activities. So now, as you work your way through college, you get the computer science degree. You come out, and where did your journey pick up from there as you enter into the working world?
Yeah, so I was really fortunate. I managed to get internships every summer during my university career, or while I was in university, I should say. My first one was probably one of the most hilarious ones, where I ended up working at a tech startup, which was literally just two people in Jakarta, Indonesia, of all places. And I say it's probably the most hilarious one I've done. Full respect for the team. I love them so much. But the only other developer on the team didn't speak English, and I don't speak local Javanese. So it was a very interesting, like, copy paste code into Google Translate so I could figure out what the variables and the comments mean so I could actually write more code. So from there, I got other internships at Amazon and Oanda. And then after graduating, I joined Microsoft in Vancouver. And after just over a year at Microsoft, I ended up moving to Kitchener to join Square, which is now known as Block.
One question on that before we get to the Square. So you went to Microsoft, and you said that you were there for about a year. Is that right?
Yeah, just over a year.
So now, what made you decide to switch from going to Microsoft? And both of them are great companies, and I'm sure are provided great opportunities. But what made you decide to switch over from Microsoft over to Square to work on that project?
Yeah, I think in university, one of my closest friends and I had kind of come up with a pact of like, in 2 years, we want to make sure we change our jobs so that we're trying out different types of companies. And funnily enough, she's still at Microsoft. That's okay. And I think for me, it was really important to make that switch because I wasn't the work I was doing at Microsoft was not the kind of work I wanted to be doing. And I think it's really important to identify and understand that. And no disrespect to anyone there. Like I have amazing friends who still work there and they love their time and their experience. But Microsoft for me was more of I was just a cog in the wheel, and I was more like told what to write from a code perspective. And for me personally, I wanted to have a bigger impact at the organization, which I just wasn't getting that experience. And it's not a Microsoft thing; it's any large business kind of thing. So and I had a similar experience when I worked at Amazon as well. And so that's kind of when I realized, like, yes, okay, it's cool. I've got the big names on my resume, but this isn't the type of work I enjoy doing. So let's go and try and figure out what that looks like. And that led me to Square. I actually had multiple job offers from a variety of really great companies. And the Square one just piqued my interest because it was a much smaller team. It was a lot more hands-on. It was working on a product that was more B2C, which I didn't know at the time, but that is something I would have preferred to work on as well. Like something that I can use and talk about.
No, it makes perfect sense. So now you go down that route and you say, okay, I move over to Square, kind of is maybe or hopefully a better fit for you there, or provides a bit of a different challenges and structure. So now, how long did you stay there, and kind of was it a good move? Was it provided that better opportunity, or how did that go?
I will always say Square was one of the best career opportunities I've ever had. I've worked with some of the smartest people at Square. I've built, like, tested out, built, grown my skills as a developer there in ways I didn't even know I could. And I'm so grateful for the team I worked with. I was there for just under 2 years. And the primary reason I left is because the Square office was in Kitchener. And as much as I loved the team, I did enjoy living in Kitchener. I'm a big city girl, and Kitchener is not a big city. If any of you are from there, it's a great city. It just wasn't for me. And I wanted to move back to Toronto, and that was the primary reason that I left. I still keep in touch with some of the folks from there. Like, I'm still following a lot of their careers, and hopefully one day I'll get to circle back. They're actually called like no, are they called boomerangs? I think we call them boomerangs, where like a lot of folks will leave Square and then come back a few years later, and it's very common there.
No, makes good sense. So, location certainly plays a factor into where you work and where you live, type of a thing, and what jobs you take. So you said, okay, Square was a great place. Maybe you're still someday you might boomerang back, but in the meantime, you move back to Toronto and Canada. And if I remember right, and certainly correct me if I'm wrong, some of the intent was is you wanted to try your own thing or do your own business or take a crack at that. Is that right?
Not quite. So a big part of why I left Square, or more specifically moved back to Toronto, is so I could have a more active social life. So for context, like, Kitchener is, for folks who are listening and aren't familiar with it, Kitchener is part of like the Kitchener-Waterloo region, and it's a much smaller. It's becoming a city. It's a much smaller city that's like an hour and a half away from Toronto. And I think if you go there as a student, or if you go there like with a partner, or like a family, it's a great place to go and move to. But I went a year out of university, still young, still single, still like looking to meet people, like make friends, and it wasn't quite the city for me. And so I was looking for that social life coming back to Toronto. It seems like the universe was having quite a laugh with me, because a month after I moved back, COVID happened. And we went almost immediately into a lockdown here. I actually escaped with like a day's fluctuation, where I ended up going back to Kenya just so I could be with my family in case anything happened to them or me. At least we were together. And I ended up spending 8 months in Kenya for the first part of 2020. I have always wanted to run my own business. I think that's, watching my dad and the way that he works and operates, it was kind of assumed and expected of me, both like from other people who know me, but also like internally, that's the thing I've always wanted to do. But leaving Square was not for me to start a job, to start my own company. It was for me to come settle into Toronto, get that life, or like get that balance back in my life that I was looking for. And then in the evenings and weekends, I could start playing around with possible ideas for a company while having income, which would be nice. Didn't quite work out that way, but I'm still pretty happy where I am.
So now makes perfect sense. So you spend the time in Kenya, come back. Everybody needs an income in order to live and to get by, and so kind of as you're trying to figure out what you're going to do or what that source of income is going to be, I think you started a side hustle that you're still going today, but how did you kind of figure out what was the business or the side hustles or the forms of income that you're going to get?
Yeah, great question. So I started, like, while I was in Kenya, I was doing a lot of soul searching and trying to figure out like what are my next steps going to look like. After a couple of months of being there, I realized, and I was still job hunting. I was still interviewing at companies. I still received offers, but none of them made me excited to work there. They either were much larger companies that I wasn't too keen on joining again, or they were working on products or in a space that I actually wasn't that keen on, like after going through the interview process. And so I ended up turning all of them down and realized a big part of it is because I want to have that bigger impact. And for me, that was becoming a founder and starting my own thing. I'm trying to remember what your original question was now.
So that was a great setup for now what my question was, which is, so, what was the business, or kind of how did you decide what you're going to settle in on, or what the side hustle, full-time hustle, or kind of how did you figure out what you were going to get going?
Yes. So that was me leading into it, and then I forgot. So I ended up hearing about a program called the On Deck Fellowship Program, all acronymed to ODF. And that's basically a community of people that help you identify how to start a startup. And it's filled with some incredible people that I still talk to on a regular basis. And OnDeck's, like, they've changed their cohort styles significantly in the last couple of years. But when I was there, they had a lot of programming around like how to come up with an idea, how to find niches, how to find problems, how to validate those problems, and then how to like go about actually building your company. And so that was instrumental in me figuring out how to actually start a startup. Think of it as almost like a pre-YC kind of program that you can go through to like set you up and then go into YC after, which many founders have done. So originally I started playing with the document sharing platform, which is called Mido, and did a lot of work around like ideation, validation. I didn't validate it enough apparently, because I like a lot of people are really excited and keen on the idea, but they're not willing to pay individually. And that was a big mistake that I made. So I'm now in the process of shifting that into a B2B product where businesses are paying for it. And that seems to be going significantly better. And then at the same time, I also started Hype Docs. Back then, I started as a side hustle. Funnily enough, it's actually my primary focus right now. Like, it's brought the most amount of revenue in, and we have a B2B angle that we're pushing out right now, which seems to be doing significantly better than our B2C did.
Now, when you started to touch on it, but maybe just to follow up a bit. So how did you kind of settle in on those ideas? You just kind of came across them, or happenstance, or you or had a dream, or kind of how did those things come about to where you figured out here's kind of, even if it started out as, you know, some side hustles and had to pivot, kind of how did you settle in on those where you wanted to start?
Yeah, so very different for both of them. With Mido, I was working on this this big Google Doc document that I have with my family. And it is a doc, or like a folder or series of documents that has digital copies of all of our important documents. So passports, driver's license, social insurance numbers, you know, whatever it is we need. And like I created this probably, like the first time I created it was probably about 8 years ago, and it was time to update it all. So I was going through that exercise with my mom, and we were taking photos and uploading it to the Google Drive folder, filling out information. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I should be able to just take a photo on my phone and have this all automatically done for me. And that was the seedling that sprouted the initial idea. And then like tied into that, the whole privacy focus piece, some of the work I did when I was at Square was on privacy and was on how to make things more secure. So those two blended in really well together, especially when you consider like I'm Kenyan, I'm also almost Canadian, but I'm also British and Indian too. And I have passports or, you know, citizenship status in all of those countries. And so maintaining documents for each of them is extremely complicated. So that was the that was the inspiration for Mido. Hype Docs, on the other hand, it's a concept I learned at Square, which is, you know, the bare bones concept is track your achievements. And it's a great way to help you beat imposter syndrome. And it was something that started out of the Women in Computer Science group at, or the Women Engineering group, sorry, at Square. And so that was a Google Doc originally. I then converted mine into a spreadsheet, added a bunch of additional things like goals and OKRs into it, and have been giving talks on Hype Docs and hyping yourself for years, that I realized, like, you know, I'm working on my own. I don't have that aspect of like hyping myself the way I used to, and I missed it. And so there was a long weekend where I felt a little blocked on Mido, and I felt coding inspiration. And so I just whipped together the V1 of Hype Docs, launched it in like 3 or 4 days, and had my first paying customers that day. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess we're just going to maintain this, keep it alive, and like see what happens with it.
Well, sounds like it was both a couple, you know, good ventures, and sounds like, you know, the second one, which was Hype Docs, which was both kind of started as side hustles, was the one that grew or provided the greater opportunity. So now, excuse me, with that, you know, catch us up a little bit. Where are you at today? Where the business is? I think you mentioned what, you know, the original business is still a side hustle. Hype Docs is now kind of a larger focus, but give us an idea. It's kind of as the business is taking off and you're approaching retirement because you've made so much money and you're so wealthy, still early stage, still pivoting, still adjusting, kind of where are things at today?
Definitely still early stage, nowhere close to retiring from all the boatloads of cash that I'm making. Still, you know, still working on buying the boat at this point. And I'd say so for Mido, we're in that B2B discovery phase to figure out who the right businesses are for us to target and what tweaks or changes we need to make to the product so that it works for them, at least as an early MVP. And that's a product that I have actually spent money building so far. And so I want to be very careful on validating more of our next steps before I actually go out and spend any further money building it out. With Hype Docs, funnily enough, it's something that I've been able to code myself. All the hosting fees and everything are $0. Pretty much my only cost to run it is the domain price every year. So $12 to $14 depending on which country you're in, and that's my expenses to run Hype Docs at the moment. I had about 3-4 months ago, I realized that I wanted to shift Hype Docs into a B2B model instead of its pre-existing B2C model. And a big part of that process was understanding, like, okay, what is working about the platform today? And what kind of changes do we need to make to it so that it actually helps employees, which is who we're targeting. And then separate to that, like, what are we actually selling to businesses? Is it the web app that already exists? We did a user survey with our customers and realized, like, the biggest issue is the fact that it's a web app and it's not sticky. And because it's not sticky, it's hard to get the kind of engagement we want, which is a common issue with many, HR platforms. And that's when I call it my moment of genius. About a month ago, I had like this moment of genius where I was like, oh, okay, instead of coding a mobile app, which was like a fifth of the way through, why don't we instead focus on a Slack app, which is a tool that many people already use daily. And we can integrate the entire Hype Docs experience into your Slack, your Slack account, so that for you and your company, you're able to go and add those hypes, hypes are achievements and wins. You're able to add goals which you're working towards. You're able to share them publicly with other people in your company. You're able to celebrate what other people are working on. And we've been basically pitching that to a few different companies. We've probably got about 12 that are in our pipeline right now for a pilot program I'm planning to run in once January hits, because no one's doing anything in December. And that's kind of where we are right now. And from some of those early conversations, we've already got requests for integrating into other tools like Jira, Trello, even integrating outwards to Twitter and LinkedIn, and then building out a kudos system on top of what we have, and building out a reward system on top of what we have, because it'll make the entire experience live organically within your Slack account, but it's all about hyping you up as an employee instead.
No, sounds like a great place to be, and lots of opportunities. It's exciting to always to launch different pilot programs and see how they go, and hopefully find success. So definitely wish you the best of luck with that. So
thank you.
Well, with that, now as we've kind of excuse me, reached the present day of your journey, and even are hearing a little bit of where things are headed, great time to transition to the two questions I always ask at the end of each episode. So the first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what'd you learn from it?
So I'd say the worst business decision, I'm a big believer that something is only a failure if you don't learn from it. And so whenever people ask me, what's your biggest failure? It's like, well, I don't think I have a failure per se, because I've learned from it and I haven't done it a second time. However, worst business decision is technically a different question. I'd say it's probably not exploring the B2B angle with Hype Docs earlier. I still believe what happened at the right time, and I'm doing it now, and I have knowledge now that I didn't have back then. But a part of me knows that I didn't explore the B2B angle with Hype Docs because I wanted to keep it as a side hustle, and I thought that Mido is a much larger opportunity, and I still believe that. I still believe Mido is a much larger opportunity, but Hype Docs is something I can do on my own. Mido is something where I would need to build a team out, and it's kind of just having that tough conversation with myself, which I should have had months ago, and I've had to have in the last couple of months instead.
No, makes sense, and it is one where it's sometimes hard to figure out what the evolution direction and what the side hustles or even businesses in general are going to go, and what makes the most sense. And so sometimes you look back and those are the mistakes you make or the things that you would change, but always a great lesson to learn. So second question I now ask is, now if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you give them?
Validate your idea. Don't write, especially because I'm a developer, don't write a single line of code until you validated your idea. I'd say 80% of startups can actually build no code prototypes to test out what they're building before they actually go and dive into code. So really don't write any code. And when it comes to validating your idea, go and conduct multiple user interviews, try and sell your product before you have a product to sell. And that's true validation right there. One of my favorite books, and I read it every year now, is of course I'm forgetting its name. It's called The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick. If secretly, if you don't like reading, he's got a great hour-long video on YouTube that you can go and watch instead. And it covers really great strategies on how to design these user interviews to really get like better insight and visibility into if you're identify the right problem and are creating the right solution for that problem.
Awesome. Well, definitely a great piece of advice, and encourage everybody to take it to heart. So with that, now as we wrap, excuse me, got a bit of the cough. Wrap up this episode. And as people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Absolutely, especially if you want to be my next best friend. Positions are open right now. I kid. Best ways to reach out to me is probably Twitter or through my email, which you can find on my website. So for Twitter, it's either Aashni S Shah, which is AASHNISSHAH, or you can contact us through HypeDocs as well, which is HYPEDOCSCO, and those are the Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn handles. Or just Google us and you will find our website very quickly, I promise. And reach out to us that way. We're looking for early customers to test out the Slack app piece. And some of the perks on that front are you get a really great discount, but you also get to let me know what features you're looking for, and we'll build that into the product, which is much easier for us to do now when we're small than when we're a much larger company. So definitely reach out.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage everybody to reach out and support a great company, and if nothing else, make a new best friend. So well, with that, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been it's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you, the listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, love to hear from you. So just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners, make sure to click share, subscribe, and leave us a review, because it helps us share all these awesome journeys with even more startups and small businesses. And on that note, if you ever need help with your patents, your trademarks, or anything else with your startup or small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Aashni, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Amazing. Thanks so much for having me, and I cannot wait to chat with you about IP things.
All right. Awesome.